Novak Djokovic doesn't usually go out of his way to talk about another player's controversy, but this time he did. And what he said wasn't a throwaway comment. It was a prediction. He said Jannik Sinner's doping case will hang over him like a cloud for the rest of his career. Not for a season. Not until people forget about it. For the rest of his career. And he compared it directly to something deeply personal. His own deportation from Australia. The controversy that's followed him for years. Stick around, because breaking down exactly what Djokovic said and why he said it reveals a lot more about how these two legends actually see each other. Let's set the scene for when this actually happened. This wasn't said in a heated press conference moment or a quick soundbite between matches. Djokovic sat down for an extended interview with Piers Morgan, the kind of setting where players tend to speak more candidly than they do in a tournament media room. And when the conversation turned to Sinner's doping case, the 3-month ban, the settlement with the World Anti-Doping Agency, the timing that let him avoid missing a single Grand Slam, Djokovic didn't dodge the topic. He addressed it directly, thoughtfully, and in a way that connected Sinner's situation to something Djokovic himself has lived through. And that connection is exactly why this quote hit differently than the usual wave of fan criticism and outrage that follows Sinner around every time he wins a big title. Here's what Djokovic actually said, and it's worth hearing in full because the nuance matters. He said the shortness and the timing of Sinner's ban felt odd to him. He made clear he didn't believe Sinner had acted deliberately. That's an important distinction, because Djokovic wasn't accusing Sinner of intentional cheating. But he said the controversy over the perceived disparity between how Sinner was treated and how lesser-known athletes have been treated for similar violations would linger around him, much like his own deportation from Australia in 2022 over his refusal to take a COVID-19 vaccine. Then came the line that's now being quoted everywhere. He said that cloud will follow Sinner, just as the cloud of COVID will follow Djokovic himself for the rest of his career. He added that these things fade over time, but they never fully disappear, because there will always be a certain group of people determined to bring it back up. Think about what Djokovic is actually doing here. He's not just criticizing Sinner from the outside, the way a fan or a pundit might. He's speaking from direct, lived experience about what it's like to have one controversial moment define how a huge portion of the public sees your entire legacy, no matter what else you accomplish. Djokovic has won 24 Grand Slam titles. He's arguably the greatest player of all time by the numbers. And yet, mention his name to a certain segment of tennis fans, and the Australian deportation controversy still comes up almost immediately. He knows better than almost anyone alive what it feels like to have a single incident become permanently attached to your name. That's why this quote landed so differently than the usual Sinner is a cheater, comments flooding social media after his wins. Djokovic wasn't dunking on a rival. He was, in a strange way, extending a kind of grim solidarity, telling Sinner, essentially, welcome to the club of champions who will never fully escape one chapter of their story, no matter how many trophies come after it. The moment this quote started circulating, reactions poured in from every direction, and once again, the split was significant. Some fans praised Djokovic for his honesty and his willingness to draw a genuinely thoughtful parallel instead of just piling on with generic outrage. They pointed out that very few active players with Djokovic's status have been willing to publicly question the fairness of Sinner's case at all, given how much backlash it can invite from Sinner's massive fan base. Other fans read it completely differently, as Djokovic subtly keeping the controversy alive, using his own platform and credibility to make sure the story doesn't fully fade, even while appearing sympathetic on the surface. To this group, comparing it to his own COVID deportation wasn't solidarity. It was a calculated way of reminding everyone that Sinner's situation is controversial enough to be mentioned in the same breath as one of the most polarizing moments in modern tennis history. Tennis journalists jumped on the quote immediately, largely because it came from someone with genuine standing to say it. This wasn't an anonymous account or a rival with an obvious grudge. This was the winningest Grand Slam champion in tennis history, someone who has shared the locker room, the tour, and the record books with Sinner for years. Multiple outlets framed it as one of the most significant on-record reactions to the doping case from within the sport itself, precisely because Djokovic managed to critique the process without directly attacking Sinner's character. And this connects to something else worth understanding. Djokovic and Sinner's relationship on tour has always been layered. Mutual respect, competitive tension, and Djokovic openly acknowledging Sinner as the player now standing at the top of the sport he used to dominate almost entirely alone. We covered on this channel Djokovic walking into the gym after his Wimbledon semifinal loss to personally congratulate Sinner's entire team. A genuinely gracious, respectful gesture. Now, in the same stretch of time, he's the one keeping the doping conversation alive in the media. Both things somehow are coming from the exact same person in the exact same few weeks. Let's start with the most charitable read, because it's a strong one. Djokovic has spent years being one of the most outspoken advocates in tennis for player rights, transparency, and fair treatment across the sport, long before this specific case ever existed. He co-founded a players' association specifically to push back against what he's viewed as unfair power imbalances between the tour and its athletes. From that lens, questioning the transparency of Sinner's settlement isn't about targeting Sinner personally at all. It's completely consistent with a pattern Djokovic has followed his entire career, applied here to a case that genuinely does raise legitimate transparency questions. And the personal comparison to his own COVID controversy wasn't a cheap shot. It was Djokovic offering the one perspective almost nobody else in that locker room actually has. What it feels like, from the inside, to have millions of people permanently define you by one controversial chapter, regardless of everything else you accomplish afterward. But here's the more cynical read, and it deserves real consideration too. Djokovic is, whether he'd frame it this way or not, watching his own record chase get harder every single year, specifically because of Sinner. Every match Sinner wins, every doubt that gets raised about the legitimacy of those wins, subtly serves Djokovic's own legacy, even if that was never his conscious intention in saying it. There's also the timing to consider. This quote didn't surface in a vacuum. It came in the same general window as Djokovic's own sharp, defensive response to questions about his declining career. The "I'm not chasing anyone" moment we covered on this channel. A player under pressure about his own fading window, choosing this exact moment to remind the world that his chief rival's legacy has a permanent asterisk attached to it, is at least worth noting as a pattern. So here's the real question. Was this genuine, hard-earned empathy from the one player alive who truly understands what Sinner is going through? Or a calculated reminder dressed up as sympathy that keeps a damaging story alive at exactly the moment it benefits Djokovic's own narrative the most? Because both readings are completely plausible. And knowing Djokovic's history of being both a genuine advocate for fairness and an incredibly sharp competitor, it's entirely possible both motivations are true at the exact same time. Sinner has heard variations of this criticism before, and his response has generally stayed consistent. He said plainly that he doesn't wish what he went through on anyone innocent, and that despite knowing internally he hadn't done anything wrong, accepting 3 months away from the sport was genuinely difficult for him to process. He's also made clear, in past comments, that he's chosen not to engage deeply with critics who continue to question the ruling. At one point, when asked directly about players suggesting he'd been treated too leniently, Sinner said he didn't even want to respond, that everyone is free to say what they want, and that what matters most to him is that he knows what actually happened. That's a notably different tone than lashing out. Whether that's genuine peace with the situation or simply disciplined media training, it's meant Sinner has largely avoided turning this into a direct public back and forth with critics, including so far with Djokovic himself. And that's what makes this particular moment worth watching closely going forward. Djokovic and Sinner will keep sharing draws at every major tournament for years to come, Every time they meet on court, this quote is now part of the subtext. A legend who has publicly said on the record that he believes history will always attach an asterisk to his opponent's career, no matter how many more titles he wins. That doesn't mean their on-court relationship turns hostile. If anything, based on Djokovic's gym gesture after Wimbledon, there's clearly genuine respect between them. But respect and skepticism aren't mutually exclusive. Djokovic can respect Sinner as a competitor while still believing and saying publicly that his legacy will always carry a shadow that Djokovic's own doesn't. Zoom out, and this becomes part of a much larger story about how legacies actually get written in sports. Trophies get remembered, records get remembered, but so do controversies. And as we're watching play out in real time with Sinner, sometimes the controversy becomes just as permanent a part of the story as the achievements themselves. So where does this actually leave things between Novak Djokovic and Jannik Sinner? Djokovic said, on the record, in a thoughtful and personal way, that Sinner's doping case will follow him for the rest of his career. The same way his own COVID controversy has followed him. That's not a fan tweet. That's not a random pundit chasing headlines. That's the most decorated player in tennis history. Someone who has lived through exactly this kind of permanent public shadow, making a prediction based on real experience. Whether that prediction comes from genuine empathy, quiet self-interest, or some combination of both, one thing is becoming harder to deny with every passing tournament. Sinner keeps winning, the trophies keep piling up, and the doping story keeps resurfacing anyway, almost exactly the way Djokovic said it would. Maybe, over enough years and enough Grand Slam titles, that cloud finally does fade completely. Or maybe Djokovic is right, and this becomes a permanent chapter of Jannik Sinner's story, one that shows up in every retrospective, every debate about his legacy, for as long as people are still talking about this sport. So here's what we want to know from you. Do you think Djokovic's comparison was genuine empathy from someone who's lived through the exact same thing? Or do you think there's a more calculated reason he brought it up right now? Drop your take in the comments because this one has real layers to it, and we want to hear how you're reading it. If you think Sinner eventually moves past this completely, smash that like button. If you think Djokovic is right and this follows him forever, let us know why down below. And if you don't want to miss how this rivalry keeps evolving, because between the doping quotes, the gym gestures, and everything else these two keep saying about each other, there's clearly more to this story. Make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell turned on. Thanks for watching. This has been Tennis Zora, and we'll see you in the next one.